Am I the butthole? I yelled at my deceased brother's wife that I'm not her husband? Am I the butthole for yelling at my deceased brother's wife? I shouted that I'm not her husband. ESH. She was taking advantage of you and assuming you would constantly help her just because you were single. That was very wrong of her. But your comment how you're not her husband was indeed cruel. There were certainly better ways for you to have broached that subject. Not being the husband is not a cruel comment. She was using him like one, which is massively unfair to him. Being on call for his niece 24/7 would hinder his ability to start a relationship. I'm surprised it took 16 months to snap. There were better ways to approach it, but a firm reminder is sometimes needed, especially after how much he has done. He's not on trial for saying he's not the husband, he's being judged for his approach. You stated the bottom line though, there were better ways to approach it, end of story. A private conversation with her, a conversation with his brother, or a conversation with both at once. The approach was unnecessary and mortifying for the sister-in-law. It was a lapse of judgment that even original post seems to regret based on the last part of the post. ESH. Arguing about not joining her to attend a wedding is inviting the stern rebuke. It's a date activity, not a brother-in-law activity. I wouldn't be surprised if she wants him to date her, which would explain the argument. If the sexes were reversed, there would be a different perspective on no means no. I got an impression she was trying to replace one brother with the other in everything. I did too, and was definitely expecting him to speak up way sooner in this story. Expecting him to speak up way sooner, I think that's why the ESH verdict is so good here. This is an example of what happens when someone doesn't enforce boundaries early on when everyone is calm and friendly, and instead lets it get out of control until there is a blow-up. So the point is not you suck for having boundaries, but instead you suck because you let your boundaries get pushed and pushed until you were so upset your only outlet was to yell about it in front of everyone. It's the good person problem. You think it's good to do something for someone, but it starts to stomp on your feelings or sense of space/privacy, and you keep doing it to be nice, but you feel worse and worse until you explode. And then suddenly you're not the good person anymore. It's counterintuitive to some people, but sometimes telling someone no, I won't do that, early on before it gets out of control actually is the nice thing to do. Like if you let it go on for too long and you explode about it, you become the bad guy you never intended to be. This is literally victim blaming above. If you didn't like it, you should have spoken up, so really this is on you. You shouldn't have been wearing that dress. Not cool. I don't know if I fully agree with this being victim blaming. I've been that nice person who just sucked it up until I acted out in a real butthole way and just exploded. I would have been a lot happier if I could have learned to set boundaries earlier and communicate better. I hope the original post turns this into a learning opportunity. This is definitely not victim blaming. He was not a victim. Comparing this to you shouldn't have worn that made my blood boil. Yeah, but don't call somebody in butthole for not enforcing their boundaries. That's where it goes from what you did wasn't helpful for you to victim blaming. Saying original post needs to find boundaries, improve communication skills, and do that earlier rather than later is not victim blaming. That might be a bit much. It's a tough and emotional situation. Original post could improve things even now by communicating with Sil and his family why he blew up like that and not necessarily apologizing for his feelings, but for not expressing them for so long to the point that he ended up saying things he obviously regretted. I believe she was filling a void unintentionally and that wasn't fair to ESH. Victim blaming is something we use when talking about someone who was raped. Not someone who was asked to carry in groceries or take someone to a doctor's appointment. Lay off the escalating language. Jesus. Victim blaming is something we use when talking about someone who was raped. Or someone who was robbed, abused, taken advantage of, etc. Not true at all. Victim blaming is what we called it when a victim is blamed or held partially culpable for something that happened. It does not solely apply to rape and never did solely refer to rape. Psychologist William Ryan coined the phrase blaming the victim in his 1971 book of that title. In the book, Ryan described victim blaming as an ideology used to justify racism and social injustice against Black people in the United States. Web link. Also, I think people are forgetting he lost a brother, too. They just look and see the widow with a newborn. Did the brother have any time to process his grief? Tough situation. I think the more appropriate would be nah. This family needs grief counseling. They are all hurting and not thinking straight. They lost a family member, the wife has a newborn with no daddy, etc. No, it isn't victim blaming at all. It's about handling things like an adult and not being immature. As a rape victim, I'm pretty disgusted that you would even compare the two. It's literally how you're taught to advocate for yourself in therapy, though. Get your head checked, bro, with that comparison to sexual assault. Did you forget this wasn't our /red pill? She's a grief-stricken single mother whose daughter will never meet her father. Original post inadvertently enabled her coping mechanism by continually being a good guy. ESH, Reddit link. Why is everyone ignoring the fact that he lost a brother whom he knew and loved for much longer than she did? You don't see him taking advantage of her to deal with his grief. She's the only butthole here. Maybe, but she claimed he was single and didn't have a family. That is kind of nasty, actually. That's really disgusting that you would compare being asked to bring in groceries and going to a doctor's appointment with being raped/sexually assaulted. This isn't victim blaming. He did not set boundaries and was growing increasingly frustrated and upset by his sister-in-law's requests. Original post not communicating his frustration or need for boundaries and blowing up on her in a public space makes him an So pushing back when he said no and assuming that he should shoulder her burden because he is single makes her an as well, hence ESH. Victim of what? Original post had no power to have a private conversation? Original post was not powerless in this situation. Not a victim. And honestly, the chick is in the wrong, but I actually think her response was pretty normal. Husband of pregnant woman dies and someone allows her to lean on them. So then she leans. And is supported, then suddenly gets yelled at. No, she shouldn't have been like that, but I think it's normal, not an move. She asked him something wildly inappropriate in a public setting, this being his family gathering. She took that power to have a private conversation away. She did not ask him in private. She asked him, then demanded him, then protested and argued with him that he has to at a family gathering where anybody willing to listen could hear. Her actions were not normal. It's one thing to lean on someone for financial support or duties or necessities in caregiving. She crossed a new line when she asked, then demanded, and became entitled to his time in a romantic setting, as a date to a wedding. That's not the same as asking him to mow the yard or pick up a few things from the grocery store. If the genders were reversed and a Bill suddenly felt entitled to his Sil's time as his +1 to a wedding just because she had babysat for him, then argued that she has to at a family function, not a single person would claim he's not in butthole and not a single person would blame her for yelling no, that's wrong, I'm not your dead wife. I feel quite confident in that. It isn't victim blaming, because original post isn't a victim. A victim is someone who is tricked or has had something outside their control done to them. The difference is original post had plenty of control over this situation. It sounds like he selflessly wanted to care for his late brother's wife, and that escalated, slowly, as these things do. And as they slowly created this new normal, for her it became an expectation. It's a two-sided coin, both have been grieving and both should be afforded grace and compassion for that. However, both of them need to be able to express their boundaries and expectations verbally and not make assumptions. Her expectations are unreasonable, yes. But she's also accustomed to being able to rely on someone and now is alone, so while it's not acceptable, it is understandable. Original post needed to gently consider and explain his boundaries when he first noticed his role with her was becoming different from his other brother's role with her. You are massively misrepresenting Jack's argument here. You've made a straw man. His brother died, you're blaming him for something that he is still grieving through. It sounds like she's developed feelings for him, in my opinion. She's grieving and raising her child alone. He probably reminds her of her late husband. He's been really kind to her, well, until now. I can totally see how it would happen. Yeah, whether she realizes it or not, she's trying to replace her husband with the single brother. Yeah, I think she was grooming him to be the next husband. He could have handled it better, sure, but sometimes people just put up with stuff until they reach a snapping point. Original post snapped. NTA. JFC, she's a grieving widow, not a manipulative movie villainess. She's sad, lonely, and adjusting, albeit poorly. If he had communicated his issues earlier / in private / politely, they could have resolved the issue without the buttholery. He's not wrong, but he is the butthole. Yay, I don't think it's insidious. She's grieving, he probably reminds her of his brother. It wouldn't be uncommon to develop one-sided feelings if he's making himself available. And he's just a man who is grieving the loss of a younger brother, he isn't an butthole. She's rejected help from the unavailable brother. That is super not a good look. She isn't the butthole for basically telling a single person they don't matter because they don't have a family? Wow. It's been 16 months though. While she's entitled to her grief, she's not entitled to having her brother-in-law answer her every whim. If it were just about her being a grieving widow, she wouldn't have refused help from the other brother so that she could get him to do it instead. This woman wanted him to replace her husband. Yep. Bingo. If this were a woman standing up to her bill instead of a man standing up to a sil who is trying to force original post into parenthood / marriage against the op's will, there would be nary a peep of blame in op's direction. This is a clear-cut NTA. You don't get to argue with original post into forcing them into going as your date to a wedding. Replying loudly with very matter-of-fact statements that he is not his deceased brother is not an butthole move. NTA. Not the butthole all day. That's what I felt like she just assumed he will step right in and that was not a huge favor or that it could get weird. Sil didn't just lose a husband, original post lost a brother. I doubt things are easy for him. What a complex feeling it must be for Op, to have his brother's wife use him as a replacement. I think it's fair for him to be upset and snap at her once she didn't take the first no for an answer. Thought about it, Sil is grieving too. Nah. I think this is the right verdict. Grief sucks, nah. I spoke to my family and my brother who told me she didn't want him to help despite the offer, and it occurred to me that she was just focusing on me supporting her. It seems original post did at least attempt the conversation with his brother. Whether he did with her, no telling. Seems unlikely he did all of them together though. Being told she had flat out denied the brother's help though seems like it would agitate most people. Snapping at someone that you aren't their husband is only nasty if you realize you are treating them like a husband, or asking things of them that you would ask of a husband, even if only in aggregate. She's upset because she's projecting guilt, or because her hopes were dashed. She is the one who pushed him and got mad when he didn't want to go to a stranger's wedding. She got offended when he said ask someone else, like, brother, I'm busy. His reaction to her pushing him is still on her. So she gets to behave the way she does and he has to be level-headed about how to approach her? Dude just reached his breaking point, NTA. NTA, admittedly you shouldn't have yelled at her in front of family. However, presuming you were close to your brother, I'm sure you are also still grieving for him while also being repeatedly forced into the role of his stand-in. It is probably easier for you to help than your other brother because you don't have your own wife and kids, but you're not required to be her escort for social occasions. She could go to the wedding alone. Also, it has been 16 months, at some point she needs to become self-sufficient. She is an adult, she needs to act like it. I understand that grieving her husband and being a single parent are hard, but forcing you to be the replacement is not a healthy response for you, or her. Not healthy for her child, either. A note though, she doesn't just not want to bother the other brother with a family, that brother straight up exposed that she is refusing his help. To me it sounds like she needs some serious therapy and acknowledge that original post is her bill and not stand-in husband. Those two things aren't contradictory though. While she definitely shouldn't be leaning so much on one brother over another, she may have turned down family brother because she thought she was doing him a favor not taking him away from his kids. She's clearly wrong or he wouldn't be making more than a token offer, but it doesn't have to be manipulative, just misguided. When I read Op's post I wonder whether this woman has tried seeking therapy to deal with the grief. Helping her with rides late into her pregnancy and postpartum makes total sense. Using him as a pseudo-date to social events is weird and creepy, especially since it seems like original post has no romantic interest in her. If original post was a woman and sister-in-law was instead brother-in-law, this would be massively creepy. You shouldn't have yelled at her in front of family. If you're going to constantly pressure someone, you don't really get to choose when it's too much for them. This is where I stand too because I think the response wasn't great. However, I also think that piling the responsibilities on one person, including being arm candy for a wedding, is more egregious, in my opinion. Lady is an adult. She needs to begin to act like one and not expect original post to be a stand-in for his brother forever. Info: have you ever talked with her about boundaries, or have you said that you feel uncomfortable seemingly being her only support system? Or did you simply shout at her first? I think saying no to going to a wedding where he didn't know anyone is one of the way he wanted to set boundaries, but she just assumed that he would do anything she asked him to do, hence got offended. He's been obviously previously reluctant to help out, but hasn't said anything. He seriously unloaded on her after the first time, apparently telling her no, and the worst possible way. I'm sorry, but regardless of what he said, NTA. The outburst is a response to her arguing about going to a wedding. Seriously? That's way out of line, like he said he's her brother-in-law, ex, at that, not her boyfriend or her husband. She's clearly misjudging this relationship in an entirely inappropriate way. Sorry. Not to be argumentative. She's not his ex-sister-in-law. She wasn't divorced from his brother. She's his widowed sister-in-law. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.